It's really no secret that the Los Angeles Clippers franchise have had a rocky existence ever since they relocated to the city from San Diego in 1984. After a number of middling seasons that aren't entirely noteworthy, they landed themselves a team through the 2010s which I'm sure everyone knows at this point: Lob City. This team, led by the big three of Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan, were unbelievably flashy and were real contenders to win the chip for a number of years. However, as everyone knows, the team didn't exactly work out for a number of reasons, and after a number of runs in the playoffs that ended unsuccessfully, everyone on that team went their separate ways. Sadly, it was wasted potential for the franchise, as those guys definitely had what it took to win a championship if they figured it out. But it did give the Clippers something that they didn't entirely have before in big numbers: real fans. Not just people too broke to go watch the Lakers anymore. Jokes aside, the collapse of the most noteworthy Clippers team to date and return to mediocrity for a few years after that must have been devastating for the fans. They did get a small return for their stars and managed to hang around the 8th seed for a couple of years, but it was a far cry from their former glory days of fighting for championships. By the end of this, the Clippers did have a good prospect in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and a lot of future first-round picks that could have helped them rebuild, but it would definitely be a couple of years before anything close to the hype of Lob City. Luckily for the fans and franchise, however, a lot of players love to play and live in LA, especially players who are from the area. Usually this would just mean people join the Lakers and call it a day, but with dictator LaDisney doing his thing these days on the Lakers, making movies and load managing, it forced two top-level players to look towards the Clippers to form their own team in LA and forge their own legacy. Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are two players that similarly proved themselves as superstars while they were still somewhat young, but have also had some trouble with injuries through their careers. And as most people know, they decided to link up on the Clippers in 2019, with Kawhi literally saying that he would only join if the team traded their future for PG. This team was expected to instantly be deep playoff contenders if the two stars stayed healthy and developed chemistry. Unfortunately, the whole staying healthy and developing chemistry thing is exactly the issue they face. In their first season leading up to the 2020 playoffs, Kawhi, still dealing with a nagging minor injury, managed to play a total of 57 games, and PG, who had shoulder surgery before the season, played 48 out of 72 games in the shortened COVID season. These numbers aren't too good at first glance, but get even worse once you realize that the two leaders of the team only played 37 games together that year before the playoffs, a bit above half the potential games they could have played together. In the playoffs, that team made it to the second round and then got 4-3'd by the Denver Nuggets, led by Nikola Jokic, after being up 3-1. All in all, the season wasn't terrible for the two stars considering they had very little time to gel, and had a master of throwing 3-1 leads coaching the team, Doc Rivers. But PG did have a bit of a bad series against the Nuggets, especially his Game 7, earning the nickname Pandemic P thanks to Chuck. Either way, after Doc Rivers left in that offseason, the future was still looking somewhat bright if they could stay healthy, given that they had already almost made it to the conference finals with sketchy chemistry. In the next year, things did improve with Kawhi playing 52 games and PG playing 54. But at the end of the day, those still aren't great numbers, and once again get worse with the games played together being 43. Despite this, however, the team did make it to the conference finals, losing 4-2 to the Phoenix Suns, even after a tragic injury with Kawhi Leonard partially tearing his ACL against the first-seeded Utah Jazz halfway through the previous series. If there were any year that showed the true potential of this team, it was definitely that year. Making it to the conference finals and losing 4-2 after your best player goes out in the previous series is a big deal, and we can only assume that the series would have been much closer if Kawhi played, and we might even have seen the Clippers in the finals. However, people knew they had the talent to make it far, and this really comes back full circle to the health question. Through the recent NBA season ending in 2022, Kawhi didn't play a single game as he was recovering from his ACL tear, and PG only played 31 games after a UCL tear that kept him sidelined for weeks. Unsurprisingly, with the team somewhat in shambles, the Clippers did not make the playoffs after losing in the 2022 play-in tournament to the New Orleans Pelicans, despite being one seed higher. After 3 years on the Clippers, Kawhi and PG have only played 80 games together, not even a full non-COVID season's worth of games. And this is leading a lot of people to question if it was worth it to trade away the team's future for two players who tragically just can't stay on the court.
This upcoming season will be the fourth season since the Clippers mortgaged away SGA and their future first-round picks up until 2026, all to acquire Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. And so far, the team Steve Ballmer expected to take over LA hasn't made it past the conference finals, all while their main star Kawhi Leonard has only managed to suit up for 109 games, leaving Paul George to carry a lot larger of a burden than he expected when coming to LA. Which has also probably contributed to him now suffering his own injuries, only managing to play 133 games himself, which is just over 50% of the total games since him joining the franchise. Of course, this isn't the result the team was going for, but it seems the imminent return of Kawhi Leonard and the recent signing of John Wall, there is renewed faith within the Clippers organization for this season, as they're already seen as one of the favorites to win the championship this year. Now, of course, this could just be a sucker's bet, as the Clippers have been at or near the top of the favorites every single year since the duo has joined up, but yet it's only resulted in more drama with the firing of Doc Rivers after another 3-1 playoff blowout, and players such as Montrezl Harrell and Clippers legend Lemon Pepper Lou being sent off to other teams in very messy exits, with some of those moves coming back to bite them. I mean, they had Patrick Beverley up there doing the Kobe after a play-in victory. Now, it has to be said that when the Clippers team is healthy and on the same page, they can be a very scary team to go against. Problem is, those two things very rarely collide. Between injuries and the front office making moves every opportunity they can, the team hasn't had enough time to build chemistry. As it always seems that right at the moment they're starting to figure themselves out as a team, someone gets injured, or they're trying to injure each other. If Kawhi and PG can stay healthy throughout the season and into the playoffs, the Clippers have a solid chance this season. That's assuming Kawhi comes back in full form and still the same player after taking an entire season off. But the signing of John Wall could be very huge for the franchise, as he's still a solid ball handler, and despite losing his high-flying dunks from earlier in his career, there is still a part of his game from those years you can still see to this day. A part of his game that was somewhat overlooked due to his high-flying dunks. His excellent passing ability. Having this alongside the duo, as well as a shooter in Norman Powell, being surrounded in solid role players such as Reggie Jackson, Robert Covington, and T-Man, does start to look like a serious competitor in the playoffs, especially considering this team without Wall, Kawhi, and Paul George for most of the season last year, were still able to stay above 500 and finish 8th in the West. With that being said, there has been a lot of talent that's emerged and entered the league since Kawhi and PG joined the Clippers, with the teams such as the Celtics being led to the finals by a 24-year-old Jason Tatum, and the Memphis Grizzlies looking like the new team on the hunt, being led by a 23-year-old Ja Morant, and Sam Presti and the OKC still slowly but surely building the new baby Thunder team, built around players such as former Clipper Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Josh Giddey, and now Chet Holmgren, looking like they could be a serious problem in a couple of years. All of these emerging teams to come in the future has been slowly closing the window the Clippers have on actually winning a championship. And this might be the last and possibly the best season to go for it all. Assuming the Lakers aren't able to finesse their way into getting rid of Russ and signing Kyrie, the team should be in shambles, and Steve Ballmer and Kawhi will finally get their wish as officially becoming the Kings of LA. But of course, things could all go sideways to the point they end up looking like the Kings of Sacramento. So far, Kawhi's homecoming hasn't been the warm welcome he was hoping for. After Kawhi's injury on the Spurs, he was shuttled to a situation that he didn't choose, so the load management has been somewhat understandable, especially when he followed it up by winning a franchise's first ever Larry O'Brien trophy. But now Kawhi's in a situation that he chose, building his own team in his own hometown, and now being the main piece of that team. So now's the time for Kawhi to walk down the path he's laid for himself. Paul George, however, has been an exceptional asset to the team, averaging 22.9 points per game, 6.9 rebounds, 5.7 assists, along with 2.2 steals during this last season, when healthy that is. And now also adding John Wall to a team that is already struggling with players staying healthy, This could be another rough season for LA's second favorite basketball team, but we'll try to stay optimistic for the sake of the fun guy.
I'm a fun guy.
This is Raven B.